Representative Harrison, did you have any questions?
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. You've covered this rather extensively. Thank you so much for that. I just want to go back to a couple things. One, from your previous discussion with Chairman Moody on something that I found concerning, and I'd like you to maybe clarify some of your previous remarks with him, because I have been surprised to see over the last few days the state now start making assertions that that the prosecution was not predicated on a shaken baby syndrome hypothesis, and that in fact this was not that, but that this was effectively a battery case, and that this child had been beaten. How would you characterize those representations that we are now hearing from the state?
Well, I think a careful analysis of the trial record would suggest otherwise. I think all you have to do is look at the trial record and go through and look at their arguments, and they tried to shake a baby case. I mean, if nothing other than the defense voir diring the jury on shake a baby, doing an opening statement on shake a baby, and doing a closing argument on shake a baby, that's certainly what they were defending. If nothing more than his own representation, it was a shaken baby case.
And that's absolutely consistent with my examination of the record in this case. And what was one of the early things that struck me, and tell me if I'm wrong here, if I'm oversimplifying this, I want to get it right. You effectively had a case where the state, the prosecution, was arguing shaken baby syndrome. And the defense attorney, his counsel, said, and I believe it's a direct quote, "Yep, classic shaken baby case." And given that 20 years ago you could presume abuse, what was left for the jury exactly to decide?
Yeah, it was just, I think the argument from the defense was it didn't rise to the level of first-degree murder that he snapped, or it wasn't premeditated or whatever, just he lost it in the moment.
So was there any arguments or evidence that the jury heard that this was not a shaken baby case?
I think there were other things that went along with it, that there were bruises on the left side of the face, to the jaw, and to the chin, and multiple trauma to the head. But I think that you have to break it down and say, well, when was the trauma to the head? Because from admission to the hospital to the time the pathologist got involved, there were other insults to the head in life-saving efforts where you try to do things to relieve pressure off the brain, but those weren't there when the baby came in. They were done when they started doing things to try to relieve the pressure.
Right. So how much time to those things that you said that were related things that kind of were brought up? How much time at the trial was spent explaining to the jury any alternative explanations for either the shaken baby triad or for the other things that were observed on the baby?
None that I could find.
Yeah, none. So was there, is it fair to say that there was, or I'll ask it, was there direct evidence of abuse at trial at all, or was it all circumstantial?
It was all circumstantial. Well, it was all circumstantial or reported by witnesses who later impeached themselves by saying, I was coerced into saying this with threats from Child Protective Services or implied threats from Child Protective Services or whatever, that changed their testimony.
I hear a lot of people out there right now saying, we should just trust the jury. They convicted him. In your opinion, is it even a debatable question whether or not the jury had all the evidence necessary to make such a decision?
Well, I have to answer that two ways, Representative Harrison. I think jurors tend to get it right. Day in and day out, I think jurors tend to get it right based on what they see and hear.
Correct.
Based on what they see and hear, I think the collective IQ of a jury is 1,200. I think you send them back into a room, I think most people take it seriously. I think they put their heart into it, and I think they get it right based on what they see and hear. And I think they probably got it right in this case based on what they saw and heard. But they didn't see and hear everything they needed to see and hear to render a just verdict.
Do you think that's even a debatable question?
Not even close.
Yeah. If I can dig in real quick on something you just said, you mentioned that witnesses that may have impeached themselves. Can you give is there a particular example or a particular witness that you're thinking of?
Well, yeah.
If there's not, it's okay.
No, it's okay. There are witnesses that testified at trial, and they were witnesses from his past, and
And the reason I actually asked, because Representative Schatzline a minute ago had made a question about, whether there were substantiated or unsubstantiated discussion of violent behavior in the past that came out at trial.
yeah. Okay, on page 12 of the main document. Okay, got it. Let me turn to it here. Teddy Cox, who was Robert's girlfriend at the time, she was going to be the subject of a CPS investigation, so she was urged to provide information to implicate Robert, and was confined to a psych ward and admitted on the stand that she changed what she said about Robert based on how she felt at the time. But rebuttal witness Patricia Conklin, Teddy's sister, said Robert had a loving relationship with Nikki, never saw Robert spank Nikki, and Teddy had a poor reputation for truthfulness.
And this was one of the individuals that testified, that provided the witness testimony that I keep hearing about all over the place on social media, that there was evidence that he was a violent person.
Yes, Della Gray, his ex-wife and mother of his two older children, said that he was physically abusive, but interestingly enough, said she was scared of Robert, but during their divorce proceedings never reported any of this suspected abuse to authorities, and had a history of alcohol and drug abuse, and she lost custody of the children and never brought any of this out. She claimed in a 2003 trial during their divorce proceedings in the 1990s. So you kind of have to look at what they said at the time versus what they said when they had an agenda. So I think these witnesses, when they were looked at as to their motives and or were asked hard questions, tended to change their...
So to the best of your
testimony.
knowledge, no jury has ever found him guilty of any violent acts in the past that you're
No,
aware
he's
of?
been accused of it by people that had an axe to grind, but no evidence to substantiate it.
Real quick, as brief as you can, how would you characterize the effect on our criminal justice system if Robert is executed in the near future?
I think it would, I think if people really drilled down on the facts of this case and thought, given these facts, you can be executed against a standard of reasonable doubt, I think it would be horrifying.
Horrifying. The impact on our criminal justice system if he's executed without further due process being afforded him. Is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
Yes, I don't think he's had due process, and I don't think he's had a fair trial. And I think he should. And if at the end of all of this being presented, the decision is that he's guilty and should be executed, then that's a completely different story. But I think
Yep.
I think it should all be heard.
And I'll just, in closing, if you could maybe just, even one or two words if you can, and just tell us whether you think these are more fact or more opinion, because I know you've made a point to distinguish what you believe is fact in the case from opinion. Do you believe our junk science law, as intended by the legislature, has been appropriately applied in Mr. Robertson's case?
I do not.
How firmly do you feel about that?
I feel very strongly about that because the science has evolved and we have cutting-edge experts in this case that have taken very strong positions that the cause of death in this case, is more probable from medical complications than abuse.
And if I wrote down my notes, but just a quick confirmation, you firmly believe his due process rights have not been adhered to here, and how confident are you of that?
I'm very confident that due process can only be claimed if he is given an evidentiary hearing, which will lead to a new trial.
And if I wrote down correctly a minute ago, did I hear you correct that in this case, your personal opinion is that no crime has been committed whatsoever?
Based on the new evidence from the experts, I think no crime has been committed here.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for being here.